right, everyone. Welcome to Expand Your World. This is the last class for August, and the theme has been connecting insides and outsides. We've done that in various different ways, and the process of what we're doing in this class, I can say it's becoming a little clearer each time, and yet because part of the idea of the class is to have a distinct theme that's different each time, the theme itself tends to suggest to me slight alterations in the structure. So just broadly speaking, to sort of just clue you in what we're about to do, we have some words that I chose, and then I've put out an invitation with these classes that if you're coming to class and you read the words that we're working with and some other words that you know of strike your fancy, you could bring those. And it just so happens that both Ken and Angela emailed me something, and I don't know if you have them in front of you, but I copied them and I have those. And so the words are on the one hand ideas, right? And that helps frame what we're going to explore together. And on the other hand, they are just words, they're sounds. They have poetic quality. When we say poetry, that's maybe one way of saying something about language that's musical. So in every single class, the words are there not to, to the degree that there's ideas or concepts, they help us frame an area of investigation. But I don't choose any of the words to bring as like truths that we're going to, learn and like carry forth. They're ways of, they're like conversation starters, right? And so part of what we'll do is read the words and just be very intentional about the fact that even though we speak and we might from time to time read aloud, if we're reading to a friend, I don't know, an interesting paragraph in the news or something, that we do these things all the time. But in this class, which is going to move eventually into something that feels more like a movement practice, we want to actually include the language and the verbal communication as movement and as practice. And also the other main theme here is relationship. And that's why we have the words, and that's why the conversation is sort of designed in the way it is. Because then we're going to go into a movement experience, and then we're going to come back together, and we're going to be relating and talking again. But my hope for the class is that it doesn't just become a report back on what the movement felt like, and I liked this part, or I noticed my shoulder was a little stiff, or those kinds of things, right? But that what we do with our bodies in the practice might create, let's say, a kind of a different resonance in us, so that when we return to the words, we return in a kind of a new space to those words. And welcome, Isabel. And Isabel, most of what I've said so far, I'm just going over the sort of basic outline of what we're going to be doing.
My apologies.
Yeah. So, but one of the things, and some of you know that I have now joined a year-long training in the art of circling. And circling it's a whole practice, but what it looks like is people sitting in a circle talking. And it's bringing awareness to the conversation. It's bringing awareness to elements of the conversation that are always there in any conversation, but that we often overlook. And one of the big elements is our bodies, right? So I'm talking to you and you say something to me, and suddenly, because of that idea or those words or just your tone of voice or something, a wave of sensation passes through my body. And if you're in a circle, you might actually say, when you said that, I felt a wave of sensation pass through. And that's a way of revealing to the other person the impact of their words, right, on a somatic level. And I'm doing a funny thing because I'm involved in circling. I have a history of teaching the Feldenkrais method, and I'm looking to bring them together. And I know that's something unique because I've never seen those two things combined. But I can't quite, do circling with you here. Not yet. In about a year from now, maybe I can. But one thing that, and this is also for those of you who've been to some of the previous classes, that I feel we haven't quite really got to yet, is really speaking from what we feel. Now, people have shared a lot of that, but tonight, part of what I'm going to do is actually suggest that you begin some of the things you say with "I feel" or "I'm noticing." I'll give you those particular cues when we get to it. But the idea of embodied dialogue, which is how I've framed what we're doing when we're not doing the movement practice, when we're talking, when we're reading together. The idea of the embodied dialogue is really to include your body in the dialogue, which means that when we read the words or we hear something someone said, the concepts, the words, the ideas are present, but so is our body, and so is that experience. And there might be a way that the movement practice, such that it gives us a new experience of our body, it will actually give us a new experience of some of the same words. And we will bridge back and revisit some of the words, that we do in the beginning. And they're all on a theme. And tonight the theme is listening between sounds. Okay, that's the theme. And just to say a couple of words about that, because again, this is intended to be a practice where we work through movement, but that we take something away, right? That is of value and of use to us in our daily lives, and in particular in relationship, in our interactions with others. So I would just invite you to think about, like even now as I'm speaking to you, there's spaces, right, in between the words. And the same thing also happens when you're speaking, when you're exchanging, when you're speaking to someone. And we all know the phrase, the awkward silence, right? Why is the silence awkward, right? Or a pregnant silence. There's a very pregnant silence, like what's coming after this silence, right? It's very pregnant. It's about to give birth to something. Maybe some of you can think of other kinds of silences that are sort of, I don't know, phrases we all know, types of silence. But the point is, there's something happening. It could be the words that were just spoken that are still resonating, or like the pregnant silence, it could be the anticipation of what words or actions or experiences might come next, right? But there's that in-between moment. So, let me just check if there's any thoughts or questions about that in terms of structure. Okay, so what I'd like to do is, what we've often done is everyone has had a chance to read the different words, and I'm going to do it slightly different tonight. We will all have that chance, but since first of all, if Ken and Angela, are you both up for reading the words that you had sent to me? Okay, so I'll start just partly because the words I chose are the ones that were put out there to initiate this, and then just in the order that I received emails, first I heard from Ken and then from Angela. But what I'm going to invite each of us to do, and I will begin, is to read the passage, and then you're going to ask a question to everyone about it. And I didn't say anything to Ken or Angela about this before, so don't worry, just make it something. But it's something about, it might just be a way of highlighting a phrase or something in that passage that you find meaningful. And then I can remind people again when we get there. But what I'm going to invite you to do in response to the question is to respond by saying, I feel, or I notice, or I'm aware of, which are more or less three different versions of the same kind of idea, but it's just a way of tuning in to something in your body. And of course, part of what's in your body or in your head is the ideas, is the words, right? So it's not like you have to, but if nothing comes to you based on the words, you can just say, I feel the pressure of my bottom on the chair, right? Whatever it is, but something that's happening for you in the moment. So the practice is to speak from the moment. So I'll do that, and we'll see what happens. And people can just speak into the silence. We won't like call on people, and that too might be interesting how that unfolds. We'll do a little after I read, and then I'll invite Ken, and then Angela, and then I'll just tell you what the following steps are as we go, but that's how we'll get started. We'll be doing a little more with the words, and then we'll do the movement practice, and then we're coming back to the words. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can make the words visible to everyone. And later I'll probably put things in the chat, but for now, just to make it simple so everyone can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you want, you can take a moment to just read silently to yourself. Okay. To listen to the silence, wherever you are, is an easy and direct way of becoming present. Even if there is noise, there is always some silence underneath and in between the sounds. Listening to the silence immediately creates stillness inside you. Only the stillness in you can perceive the silence outside. So I will ask you a question that is simply, how do you experience the connection between silence and stillness? You might respond by saying, I feel, or I notice, or I'm aware of.
Seth, can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. How do you experience the connection between silence and stillness? Just answer based on what you're experiencing right now.
I feel it.
Go ahead.
I feel it in the expanding and contracting spaces within me as I inhale and exhale.
I feel my body becoming a little bit more still as I listen a little deeper into the silence.
So I feel it as at first a shock of absence and worry about what I should say or do. And then breath, release of don't have to do anything and I can notice what's here.
And I become aware of my belly expanding and then coming back again toward my spine.
Okay. So I'm just going to scroll down, and I'd like to invite Ken, you sort of sent me two different things by the same person, and I just put them because there's a phrase that's the same in both. So I included them both. So you could read it and then ask us a question, and I'm going to add one thing, which is that we can respond to Ken's question, but we also might respond to the previous person and what they said. And a way to do that, and this is something that happens often in circling practice, is to say, hearing that, I feel, or hearing that, I notice, or I'm aware of. So again, it's an invitation into really feeling the experience of the exchange as we go through it. No right or wrong. So I'll turn it over to Ken.
Music is the cup that holds the wine of silence. Sound is that cup, but empty. Noise is that cup, broken. The qualitative aspect of music is unconditioned. Music is a quality, organizing sound and time. In a sense, music is the cup that holds the wine of silence. Normally, we fill it with Coca Cola. So you always have this conjunction between the conditioned and the unconditioned, quality and quantity, the ineffable and the material. But one can train oneself to be in a position when the wind blows, you respond to it. Perhaps. The questions I think of are more complicated than just a feeling question.
Okay, just throw a question out there.
What does it mean to you to be ready? What does it feel like?
To me, to be ready feels like clearing a space in order to drink in the wine.
For me to be ready, it feels like clearing my to-do list.
Just going to speak a second time because when Maura spoke, I just found myself nodding, and then I found that I didn't want to stop nodding, and I'm just feeling that there's a rhythm that was invited through the connection with the words.
And listening to Seth's response, I feel not alone.
My mind is stuck on the wind blowing, and I'm trying to think about, do I want to be ready or do I want to be surprised by the wind? In the sense of responding to it. And I want to be surprised by the wind, like I was today, where this little storm came out of nowhere and the wind just started blowing. It was a nice change.
Feeling ready to me feels like a sweet spot between feeling grounded and a sense of lightness, somewhere, a space in between.
So I feel grateful and excited by the various variations, the diversity of answers. They all are meaningful to me. They all resonate. I think something that occurs to me is something that goes along for me with feeling ready is listening. Maybe being willing to listen.
So I'm going to invite Angela to read, but I'm just going to make a final comment, partly as a way of transition, that I'm feeling that this idea of silence as being something in between is already becoming a little more like I feel myself listening. Even in the beginning, there was a moment of Angela and Miss Bell maybe speaking at the same moment, and then, right? So there's a space that we're sharing. And there's a sense of when we are in between, it's just by virtue of the conversation, there's already more of a sense of we're in a bridge maybe between what was just said and what's going to be said. So as we move, and the words were from Robert Fripp, he's a musician, is he not?
That's right. He's a guitar player.
Right. And who are these words from, Angela? I forget.
A acoustic ecologist called Gordon Hempton.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see all the way down? I have these Zoom controls in my way.
Yeah.
You can see to the end. Okay, so just before Angela begins, what I'll suggest this time is that she's going to read, she's going to ask us a question, and then we already started to open up a little bit, right, last time. So let's just take the conversation maybe a little further. We, by virtue of these three quotations, we have a kind of a theme, but we could include just anything that's in the, let's say, in the air at this point. But we'll have Angela begin us in the same way with the reading and the question, and just the ongoing encouragement to speak from the body. But let's also feel like the structure could be a little more open, a little more flowing now as well.
Silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything. It is the presence of time undisturbed. It can be felt within the chest. Silence nurtures our nature, our human nature, and lets us know who we are. Left with a more receptive mind and a more attuned ear, we become better listeners, not only to nature, but to each other. Silence can be carried like embers from a fire. Silence can be found, and silence can find you. Silence can be lost and also recovered. But silence cannot be imagined, although most people think so. To experience the soul-swelling wonder of silence, you must hear it. My question is, what does silence nurture in you?
I'm struck by the phrase that silence cannot be imagined, that you must hear it. And I'm struck by how true that rings to me as an embodied sense, and therefore it really brings me in touch with my core being to feel it that way, which I'd never felt that deeply. Gives me a whole new respect for silence.
When I saw and heard the last two lines, I felt that kind of easing and relief of something that of sort of the yes.
And I find this whole passage very grounding and sustaining. And the notion that silence can find me is absolutely thrilling. Yeah, very expansive.
Feel that silence nurtures my curiosity and it nurtures or invites just the capacity for connection to what is beyond me, because there's something from the very first thing, the words that I read from Eckhart Tolle. He says you can only listen to silence from stillness. And I think Angela's question takes me back to that, because I feel myself making myself still in order to feel the silence, but that how that also connects me. And in this moment, it started raining and I have a air conditioning unit and there's just really loud raindrops on the out there, which I just love. It kind of, it's like my favorite way to fall asleep at night.
Listening to everyone's responses is bringing up within me this kind of felt sense of reverence for these spaces and the aliveness of those spaces, you know, that holds this presence of everything between the sounds.
So with that, I'm gonna
Can,
pick up.
can I ask Angela, could you repeat the last name of the?
Yeah, Gordon Hempton, Hempton.
Wonderful. I better write it down.
Yeah.
Want a little bit more. Fantastic.
This is from a book called 1 Square Inch of Silence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Just a moment, because I'm trying to sort of copy paste. I think the screen sharing function kills the copy paste function. So I'm just grabbing. So maybe just while I'm fiddling about, just come into silence and experience what that is for you now. Wow. Okay. This is not according to plan. Well, Give me one more moment. Okay. I've worked this out now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put all three of these passages that we've read. There's the first one. And you'll notice that the way I have them, it's not in the chat, of course, it's condensed down a little to what I had on the screen, but you'll see that I've made every sentence a new paragraph. That was on purpose. Okay, so you have these sentences. And what we're going to do next is that we're going to read all of these texts together. And we're not going to worry about, so they're going to get long and you might have to scroll up and down your chat by the looks of it. A couple of you already mentioned like the lines that stood out for you. So if you want, you can sort of be, you know, scouting for your favorite places. But what we're going to do is we're going to read, but we're only going to read one sentence at a time. And we don't have to read top to bottom. We're just going to read a sentence into the silence. Or it could be that from time to time, two people read at the same time, or in fact, that's welcome. You could decide this is, we're coming to a place where the interference and the sort of jumbling of the words and everything, it makes them automatically a little less, it takes a little bit of the meaning away in terms of the structure of how they're being organized. But of course, we might have chance encounters between these phrases that create new meanings. And so the invitation is just to notice how you enter the silence, right? Notice the silence. It's just another way of creating a new kind of silences that will show up within the music of the words. We're still embodied. We're still resonating these words in our own throats or in our ears as we listen. So we'll just do this, and maybe I'll even use a little timer I have here so that I don't have to interrupt and say, okay, guys, that's enough, but rather we'll have a little kind of a bell. And I think I'm just going to set a timer for 5 minutes for us. And once I say begin, anyone can begin. And there's really, other than that, we're just going to decide by our own listening when to read, when not to read, how much space to leave. But you have a whole sentence, right? And you know, you can imagine if two people are reading that the words might intersperse. Like you can play with it. So I think I've said enough. You get the idea. Let's just see how it is. And so unless there's a lot of sound, Angela, you can feel free to unmute as well. Everyone's unmuted. Or you can, you know, if you want to mute when you're not speaking, it's fine. But let's begin.
Silence nurtures our nature, our human nature, and lets us know who we are.
Normally, we fill it with Coca Cola.
But one can train oneself to be in a position when the wind blows, you respond to it.
Silence can be carried like embers from a fire.
It can be felt within the chest.
Listening to the silence immediately
It is the
creates
presence of time
stillness
undisturbed.
inside you.
Music is a quality organizing sound and time.
It is the presence of time undisturbed.
Silence can be found,
Perhaps
and it can find you.
even if there is noise, there is always some silence underneath and in between the sounds.
Only the
Silence
stillness
is not the absence
in you
of something,
can perceive
but the presence
the silence.
So you
Of
always have this conjunction between conditioned and the unconditioned.
Normally, we fill it with Coca Cola.
Quality and quantity. The
only the
ineffable
stillness in you can perceive the silence outside.
and the material.
Music is the cup that holds the wine of silence. Sound is that cup, but empty. Noise is that cup, broken.
It can be felt within the chest.
It can be felt within the chest.
It can be felt within the chest.
The silence cannot be imagined, although most people think so.
Well, so let's take a moment to step back from the structure, and let's just speak about what that was like. What do you notice? There was some interesting things there. What was that like for you?
The more we went on, the more I wanted the silence to expand more. I wanted more of it.
in some ways, the experience at times felt like my mind, that I'll be thinking something and then something will be like, perhaps. It's like, wait a minute. Everybody be quiet here.
But it was great how they worked together. There was a lot of some echoing, some answering.
Mm.
Really nice.
It felt really fun to me. I like the changing rhythms and spaces. And yeah, it's like being inside an art installation.
It's a beautiful way to think of all the voices in my head, like jazz, actually.
Mm. Yeah, I like that, because there is a way, right? There's a quality that most of us know of some kind of voice. Sometimes more friendly, sometimes a little less, often redundant, like saying things that it said to me already even a couple minutes ago, right? But there's, and even that mental voice, it has a rhythm, has a tone, there are spaces or less spaces, there's tempo, and there's all of these things. And then, then there's us listening and trying to figure out, is this jazz or is this is this the broken cup? Is this, what is this? Well, so I actually originally had a slightly different idea of this, and since there's more than one possibility, I'd like to invite us to do something a little different with this. Goes a little against what Isabel was enjoying about the spaciousness, but it might open up a little more of the jazz. And so what I'm going to ask you to each do is pick one of these 3 quotes in its entirety, and then you're going to read the whole thing from start to finish, and we're all going to start together. But we're not going to, as I say, avoid speaking over each other, but we're also going to see where we can find spaces. And so that's part of why I spaced, again, the sentences, but you've got commas, you've also got spaces between words that you're welcome to make use of. And let's see, these quotations are, they're roughly equal in length. If you come to the end and you feel like everyone else is going on, if you want to have a final word, you can pick one extra sentence or something like that. But I think just imagine reading one of these very slowly. How long would that take? Maybe a couple minutes, right? But so this would just be 2 or 3 minutes. Let's not, so we will all get to the end at some point, right? If you want one more wild card, just so 2 people aren't right, you could decide to start halfway through and loop. That would be another way. So just pick maybe your favorite sentence to start on, but when you get to the end, go back to the beginning, and we'll just do a single reading of the 3, and just to see what happens. Good enough? Okay. So when you are ready, you can begin. Silence
Silence can be found.
is not
Silence can be found.
Is
the
Silence
Silence
Find
can find
you.
you.
absence of
holds
something,
Can be
wine
lost and also
lost
but
recovered.
the presence of everything.
empty.
and
Silence nurtures.
It is the presence of time,
Silence cannot be imagined,
undisturbed.
although
Our
most
nature,
It can be felt within the chest.
our human nature.
And
that silence.
Silence
cannot be
nurtures our nature,
And
Okay.
let us
our
know
human nature,
to
our-
experience
and lets us know
soul swelling
who we are.
higher in silence.
left with a more receptive mind.
To
We
experience
must
left with a more receptive mind
Full
and a more
swelling,
attuned ear,
wonder of silence.
we become better listeners,
You must hear it.
not only to nature,
only to nature,
but each other.
Silence
but each other.
is
Quality
Silence can be carried like embers from a fire.
the
and
absence of something,
Silence can be found,
but the
and
presence
silence
of everything.
find you.
This is not the absence of something,
Silence can be lost and also
Presence.
recovered,
of everything.
but silence cannot be imagined,
Undisturbed.
This
Undisturbed.
presence of time,
although most people think so.
undisturbed.
It can be felt with the chest.
To experience
It
the
can be
soul
felt
within the chest.
swelling wonder of silence,
Silence nurtures our nature.
you must hear it.
Silence nurtures our nature,
Our human nature.
our human nature.
And also recovered.
And lets us know who we are.
Lets us know who we are.
Right. How is that different?
More dissonance, not as resonant as the first time. I felt.
It makes my heart beat faster. It's almost like a, I don't know, like trying to make sure you get enough food when you're in a lot of pain. Feels like a little bit of a rush to me. Like it's not settling. It's much more creates, like I said, my heart is beating much faster right now than it was earlier.
I was disconnecting from the words that were coming out of my mouth because I was listening to what was going on, and it was really discombobulating.
So that I think is really interesting, and I think it also ties into the previous comments a little bit. And I just want to point out, because what did you do in that class? Oh, we all read this stuff at the same time, right? Well, why did you do that? But what's it like in conversation, sometimes, or even in a group conversation, or in that conversation in your head, right? Is there something that was maybe familiar about this, some aspects of this? And then were there still those little moments of silence, right? Maybe even more precious, even though they weren't, just because you maybe wanted them to be longer.
I felt like it felt more like the ocean to me, or the ocean edge of the ebbs and flows, and the kind of getting washed over, and then it receded, and there was moments of openness. So I felt like I had to listen and participate very differently than the previous time. But I enjoyed that sense of ebb and flow and of the kind of musicality of it.
That's very interesting. I'm sorry, Ken. Because part of what not this exercise, but the other exercise reminded me of when I was a girl and I would wait to get into the jump rope.
Mm-hmm.
So that rhythm, and I would sense it with my body, and then I could get in. But with this one, I didn't feel that, maybe if we had a drummer hitting, I didn't feel that rhythm that called me in at a certain time that I had to decide. And so those voices happened in my head again. Now, no, not now. Hurry up.
So I have a whole history of writing music for multiple readers that read it simultaneously. So I don't have any necessarily automatic negative association with this kind of experience. So I have to also keep that in mind, because most people haven't sort of this is kind of like something familiar to me. But when Maura was talking, I was just looking in the 5 squares. So if you would just feel what you're doing and don't stop what you're doing, but look into the 5 squares, notice everyone's movement now. And just keep bobbing the way you're bobbing. And then I'm gonna shut up. But see if the movement, the visual movement and the felt movement in your body has something to do with how you experience the silence. And then just one other thing, if we take another moment, because there was a little discussion here, right, about dissonance, or maybe we need someone to keep time, but even if you just pick one other person and you feel your rhythm, and you don't necessarily have to change it, but you try to take in their rhythm along with your rhythm, and just see, can you actually, whether or not you identify as a musician, is there just some kind of entrainment that maybe begins to take place with you that you can sense into? All right, well, if anyone wants to speak to that, they can. Otherwise, I'm just going to invite us to move into another piece of this. But
Well,
yeah,
I do want to, I would like to say something, which is the kind of rocking that happens here and now in me is similar to something I've noticed when I've been in improvisation labs and getting a feeling for people engaging and me engaging, that there's a kind of carried away that I very much like, and I'm not sure why it comes up as this rocking, but I identify it as that.
well, if you just watch people at a concert, right? What do they do?
Well, and a music concert, there are set rhythms, you know, and that's a coordination mechanism. And in these improv things, I think there are some rhythms that undercurrents, but not necessarily the rhythm of my rocking.
Right. Human conversation is less we're doing Shakespeare or something, or reading, sonnets. The meter is a little less predictable, but there's a way that also, part of how you know that you're fluent in a language you've learned is that you can have that flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you like measured out the syllables in a series of sentences that you would say because you were actually trying to say something intelligible, there'll be short ones and long ones. There'll be, and different people have different rhythms in speech, but so there's this musicality that might be there. And then, maybe even in those pregnant or those open silences in between, there's still a residue or a echo of the rhythm.
Well, and I'd like to throw something more in, which is that that ebb and flow that I mentioned with the ocean, that I think when things are really happening, it's not monotonous. It's not a single rhythm or a single tone. It's changing.
I almost feel a sense of a pulse in the silence, right? That kind of pulls you, or maybe setting that movement. You can feel it.
Gave myself a little slap on the wrist a couple minutes ago because I kind of asked a question and then didn't ask a question, but it was partly just because I'm there's a couple more pieces that I'm looking at where we're at. But the reason to feel like we can move from here straight into the next things that I think it's going to build on this feeling of what has just been spoken to about maybe a pulse. And so I'll just say that we're going to move into a process that invites a little more movement and move away from the Zoom screen for a little bit. But you already know this. When that comes to an end, we're going to return here. And we're going to return to the words. And I'm actually going to introduce some new words. And it's pretty funny because I won't tell you why yet, you'll see. But Maura mentioned her to-do list earlier. And the title of the passage is the to-do list. So it's pretty perfect. But I'll just invite you now. In terms of arranging yourself, I'm going to invite you to be sitting upright for a time. You can do that however you like. The main thing is to be comfortable. And then I'll invite you to lie on your back for a time. And that's all you really need to know. But when you lie down, when you're in the room, it's great if I can see you, if you direct the webcam. And then, and then we'll come back after a while, after exploring, but we're still on the same theme, right? So just find a place to sit. If you're already in that comfortable place, I'm going to encourage you to reorient yourself away from the screen so that you'll hear me speaking, but you're really invited into your space and out of the virtual space, right? Into the space of your room. And as you set up, just notice sound. For some of you, you're making sound as you situate yourself. And I'm going to try to be really mindful, even as I'm giving us something to do and I'm speaking in order to do that. I'm going to do my best to leave spaces in my speaking. But I will also just say that if you're listening to something, and listening is largely the activity we'll be engaged in, it's maybe inevitable that I will seem to interrupt you when I speak and you're listening. But the things I'll be saying might be suggestions to help you hear new things. So I guess it's just kind of a almost unavoidable part of the process, and I'm going to try to leave the space, but hopefully you can just notice that my speaking is part of the sound environment, right? But in the beginning, I'm going to be.
I do have a quick question, Seth.
Yeah, sure.
For the sitting part, you want us away from the screen. You're not able to see us, but for the laying down part, you do want us to be visible.
It's actually great if I can see you the whole time.
Okay.
Which just means when you transition, you maybe point the camera downwards. But
okay.
The main thing is I want to encourage you not to have the experience of looking at the Zoom screen and looking at your computer, because that will put you into that framework.
Okay.
Want to liberate you at least for a time. There's be nothing that I do visually that you need. So I encourage you to treat it like a radio broadcast and really, and maybe the simplest thing is to close your eyes in the beginning. Okay, so I'm just going to suggest a couple of things about the listening in the very beginning so that then I can really remove my voice from your environment for at least a bit of time till you establish a listening that is local to you. But what I'll suggest to you to begin is that you tune into the connection you have to support the floor underneath you, or if you decide to sit in a chair, it could be the chair. Notice where you're bearing your weight. And now we were just doing a little bit of rocking. So invite a little bit of gentle rocking. It could be forward and back. It could be left and right. And you're just going to keep doing that. And you just find your own rhythm. But the reason to invite the rocking is to maybe cancel out any idea that you're supposed to be stock still, right? Just notice if there's some freedom or some comfort in allowing movement as opposed to I'm just sitting as if you were a statue. And then as you find your rhythm, make yourself into some kind of a pendulum. Can you also become aware of your breathing? So you can still rock, but you feel the in-breath, you feel the out-breath. And then surely you're already aware of surrounding space and sounds, but begin to notice particular sounds. Some people like to count the sounds. It's not important how many, but just as a way of labeling. If it were me, I'd say I hear the rain falling outside my window, and then I might name another sound. As you rock and as you listen, include the sound of your breathing as one of the sounds. Just notice that whatever else is happening, there's a sort of a way that the sound of your breathing frames the other sounds. And it could be that your swaying has become very small now. It's not important that you deliberately keep swaying, but just, again, you allow movement. You don't feel that you must be stock still. But now you might experiment with leaving some space between the end of the inhale and the beginning of the exhale, or the end of the exhale and the beginning of the inhale. And just notice that, of course, that changes the felt experience of the breathing, but it also creates a little pocket of silence where your breath does not make a sound. And maybe in that pocket, the way you hear the surrounding space is different. So you have a moving connection to the ground below you. Have rhythmic movement and sound of your breath. Have local sound, which might include a sort of a constant sound. Like there might be something that hums. You might even, like if you were going to sing one note in this moment, you could probably tell, like, if I wanted to feel like I was singing a note that was in tune with the space, I might sing this note and I might not sing that note. Maybe there's just a sort of a baseline sound. So all of these things are present. And there's another rhythm that's present that it was actually mentioned already. But in order to bring it out, please take one or two fingers now and find that place on the side of your throat where you can feel your heartbeat. So it might be more of a felt sensation of your fingers feeling it, but you might begin to hear it as well. Yeah, some people are putting their hands in other places. Wherever you can distinctly feel the heartbeat. I often use the side of the throat, but notice the coming and going of your breath and the rhythm of the heartbeat, which are probably not the same. So how many times does your heart beat during the inhalation? How many times does it beat during the exhalation? Again, if you wish, you can place silences between the inhalations and exhalations. There's this whole menu of things which no one's asking you to hold all simultaneously, but notice how these sounds come. Some sounds come in between other sounds. So you could listen to the heartbeat, or you could listen to the silence between the heartbeats. So in a moment, I'll invite you to rest on your back, but just before you do, again, connect to the heartbeat, maybe with your hands somewhere. Be present to your breathing and any maybe simple swaying movement. And then slowly bring your other hand up to your head to cover your ear on that side. Cover one ear. Listen to the inside of your hand. And now the hand that's listening to your heartbeat, you can move that hand onto the elbow of the arm that's connected to your ear. And just notice that when you touch your elbow, it resonates the bone of your arm into your ear. And you might tap it or you might caress your elbow. Just feel the resonance of your arm as it connects in. And stay connected to the breathing. And slowly bring your arms down. And now, as quietly as possible, but with an awareness that you might find it impossible to be perfectly silent, just listen to the sound of yourself coming down to lie on your back on the floor. Okay, and just arrange your legs comfortably. It could mean putting your feet on the floor with your knees bent. It could mean having the legs long. Have your arms on the floor by your side. Just take a moment to sense which of those elements that you were paying attention to are still present for you. Probably you can tune in fairly easily to your breathing. Notice if you're still present to your heartbeat. And then the sounds around you. And now, please place your right hand on your belly. And then please place your right hand on your breastbone. And then place your right hand on the front of your left shoulder. Just notice that your right shoulder blade is probably away from the floor. There's maybe a little more weight towards the left as you reach across yourself. Place your right hand on your forehead. And then back on your breastbone. And then as you place your right hand on the right side of your pelvis, can you imagine the space inside your pelvis as if it was a drum? You're placing your hand on the side of your pelvis, but just rest it there. And then place your hand on the bottom of your breastbone, but think of the interior volume of your chest. And then just think of those different places that you have touched now. And taking exquisite time, move your right hand from one place to the other. And listen to the sound of your hand moving through the air. Every time your hand touches your body, just be aware of that connection. And notice what happens in your mind as you direct and track the movements of your hand. Is there kind of a mental sound that's like the musical accompaniment of the choreography of your hand? Or if your hand is in space and it doesn't encounter resistance, does it actually feel like it doesn't make a sound? And as your hand moves from here to there, what do you hear in the spaces of time when your hand is in the air? What other sounds happen in between the moments where your hand is resting? And please place your right hand at the bottom of your breastbone. So maybe the fourth and fifth fingers are on your belly, but you feel the thumb and maybe the index finger, maybe the middle finger on your ribs, and just let your palm be flat and rest. Feel the movement of your breathing. And then please take exquisite time to make a simple movement. So it's not difficult, but could you savor the movement of placing your left hand on top of your right hand? What does it sound like? Once the left hand is resting on the back of the right hand, you just allow it to rest and you listen there. But after a time, in a moment of your choosing, you will, and recognizing that it's kind of like the beginning and ending of a musical phrase, and that there's all kinds of other music that's happening in the middle, you're simply going to move your left hand back to the floor. But there's no hurry, and you're going to move your hand from resting on top of your right hand to the floor and back, maybe 4 or 5 times, but what you're interested in is the in-between. Breath is still coming and going. Heart is still beating. Other sounds are still present. So please continue to move your left hand between the floor and the back of your right hand. But see if you can, without feeling like you're being asked to chew gum and walk at the same time, there's no particular coordination that's right or wrong, but could you now also, in whatever time feels right, just invite your head to slowly roll from one side to the other. And as you do so, notice that you're bringing one ear towards the floor and then the other. You can roll a small amount. Just make it perfectly comfortable. No need to lift your head. And you might sometimes leave your head to one side. But just notice how it's like your ears are scanning left and right. It's another framing of the sound and the silence. So notice, what are you listening to right now? Which is the rhythm that organizes the other sounds? The next time your left hand is on top of your right hand, leave it there. And then slowly, in whatever way feels natural to you, just change it so that your right hand is on top of your left hand. And then put your left hand on top of your right hand. Keep changing which hand is on top. And if you want to go faster, you can go faster. If you want to go slower, you can go slower. But listen to the sound of the movements, which probably isn't very loud. But if you think of your hands as making a sound, and it might blend with the sensation of the weight of the hands or their warmth or the pressure against your belly. Now bend your knees and stand your feet. Keep switching your hands. But as you do, very slowly tilt both of your knees to the left. Not a lot, it's not a stretch. Just allow them to move to the left and allow them to invite your pelvis and feel the movement in your lower back and maybe up into your chest. And then they come back to the middle, and then again to the left, only to the left, not to the right. Just find your own way of coordinating the rhythm of tilting your legs to the left, changing which hand is on top. Maybe you can feel the movement of your legs underneath your hands somehow. And come back to the middle and tilt the legs a few times to the right. You might find that one direction is more comfortable, so just move whatever amount is simple. Notice if the tilting the legs makes a sound. And then just take the legs once to the left and once to the right, changing your hands when it feels appropriate. And I'll stop talking for a moment, and so you can listen to everything else that's happening as well. And then if you'd like to rest, you can just let go of everything and rest. You could keep your feet standing, or you could lengthen your legs. And now just take 2 or 3 minutes to transition from being on the floor to being in standing. But before you come all the way up, make any movement that would feel good. You can squirm and you can roll, or you can do anything, but listen to the sound of your movement. You might make a sound that another person would hear as you drag a limb across the floor. But even the movements through space, just see, how do they resonate in your thinking? And what other sounds that you aren't making but that are in the space are you aware of? And how do you tune your movements to the sounds and the silences of the space around you? People are doing different things, but when you find yourself standing all the way on your feet, you might just walk a little bit through your space. Notice the experience of walking and listening. And notice if your thinking makes a sound. Or if your thinking makes a sound, are there spaces in between the thoughts that you can hear silences and the thinking also? Okay, so I'm going to invite you back and just seeing where we are. The thing that I want to invite you into, we'll make it relatively short. So I just want you to know that. But I'm going to put something on the screen and you'll see that it's a series of words. It's like a series of one-word sentences. This is the to-do list. And I'm going to invite us to speak into the silence again. Please do not read from the beginning. You're just going to read one word. And then you're going to wait until you feel like reading another word. And what I want to say about the words themselves is that they can just be a springboard for you so that you could also close your eyes and just hear your own word that isn't what you see on the screen. But I think when you see it, it'll just give you a sense, because this is a series of words that were chosen as one-word sentences, such that the meaning of this to-do list is kind of found in between. It's found in the conjunction of the words. So I'm going to put that on the screen and we'll just maybe take 3 or 4 minutes, not much more than that. And then we'll just probably open it up for discussion. So. You can read more than one word at a time, or you can read one word, but we're just all going to listen into the space and see how these words resonate.
Lengthen.
Channel.
Refresh.
Resume.
Respond.
walk, run, jump, climb,
follow,
pray,
welcome,
extend,
channel, create,
imagine, unchain,
dedicate,
push, reach, balance,
So let's continue just with our own words. Any word, just one word.
release,
ponder,
light,
Resonate,
warmth,
rumbling,
distant,
canopy,
song,
unfurl,
fractal,
All right, everyone. Went on a little longer than a short thing, but it's kind of feeling the space. I was wondering why I didn't hear Ken, but you were muted. You heard yourself. Thought Ken is really gonna like make his sounds really count. Okay, well, just given the time, and we've done so much, I just want to open the floor and just see what anyone wants to share. Won't put any more structure on us. How's everyone doing?
Good. It feels really nice to feel much more deeply into my body at the end, and to have found that stillness within. Even my mind feels calm, which is highly unusual.
We actually haven't gone back to read. Hearing that, I kind of want to, maybe we won't do them all, but let's just read this again, just to see how it lands, just the first one. To listen to the silence wherever you are is an easy and direct way of becoming present. Even if there is noise, there is always some silence underneath and in between the sounds. Listening to the silence immediately creates stillness inside you. Only the stillness in you can perceive the silence outside. So maybe that's a way to just notice if that lands in a different way now. Something about it stands out differently.
There's something about the having listened to the noise around me at the beginning and it being more outside of me, happening outside, and now being more in tune, almost rhythmically in tune with the rumbling of my refrigerator and such, that it feels more inside of me now, you know, and that movement allows me to hear that silence underneath it. And I guess that in being in tune with it, resonating with it, I can feel the silence even though I'm still hearing the noise.
There's one word I said that you all didn't hear because my thing was muted. But it's resonating with me and I'm hearing it. And actually, Isabel, what you said, and I think a lot of stuff, which is enough. I think it occurs to me, and this is a thought, that when I'm really able to hear the silence and be with it, it's like it's enough. And so much of the time when I need more, then enough isn't there. It's hard to settle, it's hard to stop, it's hard to. And it's not so easy to have enough or to find enough or whatever that means. Or maybe it is.
Perhaps.
Perhaps, exactly.
Isn't that a song? Quizás.
Yes, there you go.
I noticed in the end when we were just doing the one word, and this might be partly because I do have a musical background, whether or not you're a musician, you might have heard musicians talk about hearing music, right? And it can even be that if a band is playing and the person who's taking a solo, right? Like they might hear the thing they're about to play. They're like listening, and they're like, you even watch the guitar player, that's like they're listening, right, to what, almost as if. And so when there was a space and then I felt the word, it's like I heard the word, I'm gonna say this word, like it's already become pregnant in me. And then I felt that I had some movement, and it was kind of like, well, I could do it. I could speak now or now or now. And I kept sort of like anticipating, is this one? No, not this one, not. And then sometimes when I would just be ready, that's when someone else would speak, and then it would kind of recalibrate me again. And then I would have to rock. And it's like, I think, yeah, I've rocked enough times, and now I'm going to say, and it was like this, it was kind of like riding waves, but then like something else in the water changes the flow of the waves. So I adjust. So I really kind of almost felt like in that silence, there was little beats of silence that I was very aware of, like how many beats of silence, not like the musical way that you have to count it, but it was more like a feeling like there's a now and there's another now and there's another now. And then, oh, I think this is the now where I'm gonna make a sound, kind of like that. I don't know if that's just my kind of musician in me that does that, or if someone else experienced anything like that. But it was a shared space we were going into, right, when we spoke.
I certainly felt more of a rhythm that was matched between us this time around that hasn't been present as much. Definitely.
Everyone's still bobbing.
My guess is that it's nature thinks a lot less about this timing than we do, like the falling of the branch and the rain and the wind and the bird, and then that it just happens. I think we're gifted with our minds, right? So we hesitate, or we wait for the right time. Perhaps.
When you say that, though, you said gifted with our minds, and I don't know if it was just a pure thing or if there was some irony in saying that, because
I mean, I guess it can be seen as a gift, or it can be seen as a curse at times, but
right.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think this awareness that we have can be a gift. This awareness of timing. I don't know. What say you? I don't know. Is nature aware the way we are aware? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, there was a comment from Isabel about the mind being a little quieter, right?
Yes.
And then she also spoke to sensing like that there was more of a rhythm. So just if we just extract that experience that she described, you could say, does mind get in the way, of the connection of the rhythm? But I think what you said about the gift of mind is very important. I don't think that, quieting the mind should should be like the goal of like silencing the mind or eliminating the mind, but it's just, it's, the breath is very concrete, the heartbeat is very concrete, but the mind also has a rhythm. And we kind of can notice through this, like, it can actually be pretty dominant in terms of the whole, even the outer sounds. I know I've noticed, I've listened to music before and then gone running, and I get a couple blocks and realize I'm still hearing that song that I was playing, and I just noticed birds. It took me a couple blocks because I'm got this thing that I'm carrying in my head, which can really be quite overpowering of other things if I'm not, careful.
Mhm.
The word that occurs to me is distraction. And it's all relative, it's distraction is being occupied by something that's not, that you see is not relevant for something else. and I think the deeper view has to do with attunement.
There's something to be said though about feeling that attunement, getting in touch with that, and syncing up with that, which is a wonderful feeling in and of itself. And then there's the kind of the deeper connection that you can get into that rhythm if you can recognize the pattern, which is the mind, which is that thinking brain. And then if you can do both together, then you can really kind of deepen that appreciation and that connection.
Because you're part of it, and your brain is part of it, not separate.
Yeah. And then, that recognition brings its own aesthetics and its own pleasure.
Yeah, there's a saying by Thich Nhat Hanh that I have up that says, this moment is full of wonders. And so, what Isabel was saying, all those wonders, they coexist. The mind is a wonder. So it's among the many musical instruments that are a wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
We're bumping up against the end here. I want to see if Angela, if you have something you wanted to share before we wrap up.
I've just been looking over the lines of what we've been reading and feeling into my experience of them now. The only the stillness in you can perceive the silence outside. It's the one that resonated most strongly, but I've been playing with the phrases about music and thinking about the music of the mind as we've been talking.
Yeah, beautiful. Great. Well, I want to thank you all. I thought this was a really, I've enjoyed this class throughout, but I particularly enjoyed this evening, and I really learned something from it. And it was partially planned this way, but I promise you it wasn't completely planned this way. But I actually going to do a workshop this weekend where I have a better sense of what I'm going to do in that workshop now. The workshop is called The Musicality of Being. And in a sense, we were in it a little bit, and I think you were describing it a little bit. But I've noticed through my circling practice, which is very much about forming connection, and I've had a little chance in that practice to observe myself connecting and to also observe myself not connecting and noticing. And even just this bobbing and swaying that we're doing in the way that we're kind of been talking about in training and rhythms with each other and the surrounding sound. It's kind of like a hypothesis I have the musicality of being is not my phrase. It's a phrase that a fellow by the name of John Vervaeke, who people who know me hear me talking about a lot, although maybe you're not all familiar with him. But to me, this kind of experience was what brought to life that phrase. Like, I just noticed in interactions with people that they had a rhythm and I had a rhythm, and I could be unaware of the relationship of our rhythms, or I could start to tune into it, right? And it seemed like we were all kind of doing that in a beautiful way at the end here. So this is all to just invite you. If you're on my mailing list, you would have seen, I just sent out an email before the class that mentions it. And this is the end of August. So there's another series of these classes. It's still every Wednesday night, but the theme for next month is deep grounding. And also in my email, or if you go on my website, you'll see all of the words for the whole month that have been chosen. But like we did tonight, people will be invited to bring their own, but they all somehow related to that theme of grounding. In fact, I think the first one is a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, as well as from Pauline Oliveros, who's a really wonderful musician and kind of a sound person. Like, she created a whole somatic practice around listening. So she's inspired me a lot. Anyway, we're past time, but I wanted to just put that in and invite you all to that. And if you have any questions, you can obviously email me, and I can give you more info. But we'll wrap it up for tonight. And thanks again, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.